Good afternoon, everyone. We're obviously feeling good?
Yeah.
Nice, I like that. So nice to see you. Thank you all for being here. I hope that you have found the last couple of days to be illuminating and productive. I want to give a shout out to those who are streaming at home.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here in conversation on this topic of creating content that matters with three incredible women. Kerry Washington, whom you all know, is an actor, writer, producer, director, author, and of course, whenever I see her, I always think of her as Olivia Pope, the role she so brilliantly played on Scandal. She is also the founder of Simpson Street Media, and she's joined by Pilar Savone, who is the EVP of Production and Development at Simpson Street as well. And also on the end here, we have Sherrese Soares, the founder and CEO of Harbourview. Yes! Her own fan club. Harbourview Equity Partners, which is a multi-strategy global investment firm focused on investment opportunities in the entertainment and media space. So, welcome to all of you. Kerry, I want to start with you because in the wake of Participant Media's closing that we have just read about recently, and for those of you who don't know, Participant Media was a social impact media company. You joined the likes of George Clooney, Matt Damon, Ava DuVernay in signing a letter, along with many other heavy hitters, to invest in values-based storytelling and, quote, open our hearts to experiences vastly different from our own. The letter goes on to say, in the face of unprecedented change and uncertainty, we need deep partnerships between diverse storytellers, advocates, and movements for change now more than ever. So how does that reflect what's happening in the industry right now?
Oh, what a great question. I want to say, first of all, I didn't sign the letter because Matt Damon or George Clooney reached out to me. I actually got some of those phone calls from Hollywood folks and was like, I don't know, let me take a look at it. Really, I signed the letter because Ai-jen Poo reached out to me. And she's an incredible community organizer and activist around health care.
That's right. Head of the Domestic Workers
caregivers.
Union.
Yes,
yep.
Head of the Domestic Workers Union. And when she reached out and said, we really want you to sign this letter, then I listened. So it's really about understanding kind of where the messaging and the need was coming from and realizing that at Simpson Street, we always think about social impact as part of how we define success, but we've often found ourselves being invited or assumed by other people that our main goal is social impact. People say, like, your work can be political or you're trying to make a statement. We're never making media because we want to make a statement. We just happen to center marginalized communities in our storytelling because we're women, because I'm a person of color. And often in culture, when you center somebody who other people are not used to being centered, it's seen as a political act. For us, it's not a political act. For us, it's smart business. We know that great content about all of us resonates, sells, works. So I think for us, it felt like there are going to be companies we want to have the freedom to lean into entertaining content that speaks to us just because it does, and to make choices about what we create that is built around innovation and storytelling. But I do think there should be companies, and they should not just be run by Black women. There should be companies out there that are run by a really inclusive board of impact leaders that are focused on making change. It shouldn't be left to just artists of color or women to tell those stories. It should be everybody's responsibility.
Yeah. I was listening to the panel yesterday with Jeffrey Katzenberg, Brian Grazer, and Lisa Joy, and they were talking about this disruption that the entertainment industry is currently in the midst of. With the consolidation. Exactly. This week we were talking about how you believe it is the Wild West. In what way is it the Wild West? And do you think that diverse stories and diverse narratives are being sacrificed in this unpredictable era?
I do. I think that is one of the ramifications of the strike. I think that there's much less slots. Buyers are trying to figure out what people want, and those stories are being told less. So that it's maybe more for the mass audience and not so niche or not so social impact driven or idea driven. It's bigger broader stories, and it is
Watered
impacting
down.
people. They're watered down. They really are. So it's hard. It's especially when you are creators like us, who we are driven to those stories. We want to tell those stories about mental health or sexuality or whatever it is, and the buyers are afraid and they're scared. They're not taking the risks that they were prior to the strike.
Meanwhile, that's what audiences want, right? People want to tell stories about the truth of who we really are, about the truth of the human experience. But often, these big conglomerates, they don't want to take a risk to tell a story about truth until somebody else has done it and they know it works, and then they feel like, oh, now I can convince my risk-averse board that this is a smart business move. Smart business moves are not doing what somebody else has already done, and it works because that's done. Smart business move is always about innovation. It's about being bold. It's about being disruptive. But getting people to understand that from a content perspective can be challenging at times.
Well, there always has been this sort of derivative aspect of how things move in the industry. And
But you look at what everybody's watching right now, which is Baby Reindeer, and that's what everyone is talking about. And whoever took a chance to say, yes, let's do that, was bold and brave, and that's not happening right now.
Sherrese, as you look at what's happening in the industry with all of the media consolidation, from a financial perspective, where do you look for opportunities?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, absolutely in this moment, I feel like, especially because our company started with investing specifically in music content, we know that 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago or so, the music industry obviously experienced a massive disruptive force called Napster engaging in the business and really throwing and unpending the business model as we know it. What that fostered, though, as we fast forward 15 years hence, we're all having really exciting conversations about regional Mexican music or Afro beats or lots of different genres where 20 years ago they weren't given an opportunity or given a lane to actually come to the surface. Well, what's happened 15 years hence is that this decentralized way that audience can get to the content that matters to them has given voice and given visibility to those audiences existing, and not only existing, but also having a very strong point of view around return of investment or return on investment. So I am actually, as an investor, really excited about this moment, and I know there's obviously a lot of pain in this moment for how do we get storytelling around these diverse audiences made in this moment when everybody is constricting. But in this moment, as an investor, I see a real great opportunity to start to think through audience and building for audience and centering audience, because just like the music business, the video business, film, television, the way that we all consume is now so decentralized. People have paths to audience in a way that they didn't have those same paths 15 years ago. I bet everybody in this room has a list of 10 great shows that they're watching, and there's probably overlap that we all have that's maybe 15 to 20%, but the other 80% is something new that you're going to share with me or tell me about. But that doesn't mean that you're alone in this world. There's millions of other people around you, because we're talking about a global denominator, if you will, and that global denominator is by definition not homogenous. So I see it as a real financial opportunity, and it also happens to be because it's very close to my own lived experience. I'm obviously, in case you didn't notice, a Black woman. I happen to grow up in Queens, and I happen to be the child of immigrants. And so the music that I grew up on, most of you in here may have never heard of, right? Like I grew up on Byron Lee and the Dragonaires and cent, 5 cent, 10 cent. You don't know that, but hey, dollar, right? But you may not know that, but me and millions of other people like me know that. And so now we live in an economic system that is starting to create value against those audiences, and so I'm really excited about that.
And I just have to ask you, Sherrese, what do you look for in your investments? Are there prerequisites for what you're looking for?
So the prerequisites for us are twofold. One is obviously we're thinking through, and I think one of the things that the last decade or so around creation of content has done is it really has exploded the dollar per cost of hour of programming. In today's market, we're thinking through how do we do that, but how do we do it smarter, and how do we do it even more cost efficient? So cost and cost efficiency is super important. But then secondarily, I'm really focused on people who are talking specifically to specific audiences and not trying to be, a mile wide and an inch deep, but instead go a mile deep and an inch wide around audience, because I think you can get to audience way more efficiently. So those are some of the things we're thinking about. We obviously think about great teams. We're not really interested in being, a script reader. Like, that's not my ministry. I did not grow up to be a person that's going to write, direct, act. I leave that to the people who are expert at doing that. But our real viewpoint is, do we see an opportunity to talk to audiences, to maybe unique audiences, wherever that audience may be, and really partner with creators around a cost-effective way to get to them.
But see, this is such a breath of fresh air, because one of the things that we've been talking about is, so often as a creative, the finances are tied to this business model where people who are trained in business are giving creative notes and don't actually understand that each of us may have different core competencies.
Yep.
So when I hear you say as an investor, I'm not going to stand by the monitor and give notes, that is a revelation. Because so much of what we do as producers is protect creators from these business infrastructures, where we're very grateful for the budgets. We're really excited. I mean, we're in a time when there's so much constriction. For us to have the number of shows that we have in production, to the amount of content that we're producing this year, we're very proud of it. It's unfathomable. But what we do a lot of the time is act as gatekeeper, because we're really trying to protect our writers, protect our directors, because they know their audience, they know their vision, and we want them to be in partnership with where the money's coming from, but also to stay true to their vision, because that courage is what inspires audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, listen, what we all know right now, and I'm sure all of the major infrastructures as we know it, Paramount, Warner Brothers Discovery, Universal, et cetera, they're all going through this moment of their Napster moment, massive disruption. They're large infrastructures built for another time. But part of what we understand is that there's a lot of duplication of effort, right? Like, so you go and you engage really great producing partners, and then you have a duplicate infrastructure internally to duplicate that work effort. In the context of a shifting model where costs and cost infrastructure has to be considered, I think we'll probably see some of that rationalization around, is it really necessary to have duplication of effort? Either you hire a production company, they've done a great job, and you hire them again, or they haven't, and you don't. But thinking about duplicating that initiative or that work product then just explodes costs. So how do we think about, again, getting to audience at the best cost, dollar per cost per hour, but also being specific to audience and letting people do their core competency, letting creators create, and letting those of us that think about creating paths to audience by, investing in that or helping to get to audience, focus on doing that.
I feel like we're forging a partnership here, a little relationship.
Always.
Another thing that I believe Jeffrey Katzenberg was saying yesterday is we're in the middle of this disruption, and none of them, and these are titans in the business, could predict where we're headed. But they all, as I said, they're titans, they're legends in the business. Where does that leave everyone else, this unpredictability? How are you changing your model to adapt to this trend of unpredictability right now?
I think part of what unpredictability does is it inspires innovation. It's freedom in some ways. One of the things that we did in recent years was force ourselves to think outside of traditional models of content creation. So if you had asked me 7-8 years ago, would one of my favorite things to do would be to host a show on YouTube, I would have said, you're out of your mind. But that has sort of, in our exploration of what else is possible in the face of a pandemic, in the face of kind of limitations according to different deals we have, that was like, here's white space for us. This is an opportunity, and it's led to Webby Awards and new relationships and new partnerships with corporations, new partnerships with new audiences. Like, it's really in some ways the Wild West. If you can step up, anybody can be sheriff in the Wild West, you know?
And Pilar, can you talk about some of those unique partnerships that you have been forging that maybe 10 years ago you wouldn't have even thought about?
Yeah, I mean, at Simpson Street, we really believe in the power of partnership. What we do is incredibly hard. And so for us, if we have partnerships with different writers or other production companies, that makes us able to do a lot more. We can bounce off of each other. Somebody else may have a really good skill set that I don't necessarily have, and also it gets us to be more innovative. We have a show right now that we are having a really hard time selling, and there's a music component, so we were like, let's go to Interscope, let's talk to them, let's see if we can bring in another, package it with a musician. So it's really just, it's being strategic, and it's about talking to everybody out in the business right now, and maybe you have to sit back, you have to wait 6 months, and just figuring out what the Wild West is in this moment and trying to have a little foresight of what it's going to be. But for us, who can we do that with, right? Who can we make the best possible show or movie with that will get out there to the mass?
We were talking about how, in some ways, diverse narratives and storytelling has been sacrificed in this sort of chaos that's happening. Sherrese, you've said you want to be culture protectors.
Yes.
I love that term. How can you do that in during these tumultuous times?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think, again, one of the things that I'm excited to build, because I know two truths about the human condition. One is that you start listening to music before you're even out of the womb, right? So music is a part of the human experience. Storytelling is a part of the human experience. And that has been true for 50 years. It'll be true for the next 50 years. So understanding that as a core value, as any investor, it's almost like fundamental to, if something that's fundamental to the human experience is, to me, deeply investable. Then the other piece is then, like, let's look at the denominator, and the world is not homogenous, right? So homogenous storytelling is by definition leaving value on the table or leaving value on the floor. So for us, it's really about finding really great people who understand who their audience is, wherever that audience may be. I obviously, as a consequence of my lived experience, can see people who otherwise are unseen to most other people, right? So that's women, that's people of color, et cetera. But I love investing, again, anywhere where people kind of really know their audience. So as an example, we have a huge heavy metal portfolio, right? Deeply engaged audience. I also have a lot of hip hop and R&B. Shout out to the Drake-Kendrick battle.
I mean, epic right now.
But what that means is that we're super focused on really just, again, people who understand their audience and partnering with creators. But we get to be in this valued seat where our team looks like the audience. It looks like a global audience. We have a team that reflects society very intentionally, because our business is to find ways to invest behind audience trends and then to partner with creators who can do that. So very naturally, I think what you'll see coming out of the other side of what we invest in is things that talk to a diverse audience group. And again, most investors know that the key to portfolio management and risk management is diversification. Like, you never have all your eggs in one basket. The same is true as we think about how we think about our portfolio construction around talent and talent management. So some of the things we've invested, just to give you a sense, is we've invested in 2 production companies thus far. Outside of our music portfolio, we invested in Macro Media, which is led by Charles King, and has done lots of great work, lots of award-winning work. We also recently invested in a business led by Javier Chapas called Mucho Más. They're focused on the Latinx audiences. So very rich pipeline of lots of opportunities, but that's how we think about it.
When I think about the idea of protecting culture, I think about a show we have on Hulu, on their Onyx Collective, which is an initiative really built around protecting voices and elevating voices of creators of color. So this is a show that I don't know if it would exist on Hulu if it weren't for Onyx Collective. It's a very particular, very specific story about a father-daughter, but the father has been in prison most of her life, gets released from prison, comes to live with her, so it's kind of like an odd couple comedy, but that deals with the ripple effect of the criminal justice or injustice system. So here's a show that is very, very specific about a very particular lived experience, inspired by a real story by a woman whose dad, Tracy McMillan, who's a family therapist, her dad was in and out of prison her whole life. When we go to South by Southwest to premiere the show, here we are telling this very specific niche story about this community, this family. We do 4 sit-down interviews with the journalists, each of a different race. 3 out of the 4 journalists had a parent in the criminal justice system. It was wild. And you realize the universal truly is in the specific. Because even people who don't have a parent in the system, they have a loved one in the system, they've been in the system themselves, or they just have a parent who doesn't have a problematic relationship with a parent, whether they've been in a system or not, right? So you start to understand how these stories, if you have the courage to go deep and be specific and honor culture and not try to make something that's for everybody, you actually wind up making something that's for everybody because you make something that's human. Truly honest in its humanity.
But Kerry, are the buyers buying this kind of content?
Well, that's what's interesting. For us, we got lucky, right? When you have the courage of a platform like Onyx Collective that's creating room to do that, you have that. But we fell in love with a documentary recently that was around similar themes because we've noticed how important this story is. So this is incredible documentary, Daughters, that we produced, that we helped to produce, premiered at Sundance, won all the awards. We thought this is a perfect fit for the kind of framework of the company that we're with, but it's not. But again, you say, okay, great. Who else wants it, right? It's fine. We're able to kind of tell the story that we're telling in this space in a really beautiful way that fits that brand. But we have other relationships in the business, in the community, so we found a home. That documentary is going to be on Netflix. So we're able to tell that story in a different way, in a different platform. But you have to be willing to have all different kinds of partnerships to embrace the different modalities of how people want to deliver content and say, like, where is the fit going to work in this moment, and not put all your eggs in one basket. To say, like, we want to be able to tell all different kinds of stories in all different kinds of ways, and so we're going to be willing to do that in ways that are very different from how the model worked 10 years ago, where like everything I do is going to be in one home. It doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I totally hear what you're saying. I think people really respond to that truly authentic storytelling rather than when it becomes performative. And we all know of those projects that have tried a little too hard to make sure that they were ticking off all the boxes. Yeah. Sherrese, you were talking about your incredibly diverse music portfolio. I love that you have such a big heavy metal portfolio. Rock on. And I'm curious to know what you think of the Drake Kendrick, like who you think is coming out on top.
I take no sides.
I won't put you on the.
I take no sides. I take no sides. But as a kid of the '90s who grew up on hip hop, as a kid from Queens, I think it was a special moment for hip hop over the weekends, and so I think that's really interesting. I think there's something to love about both, but I'm not taking sides.
Well, it is amazing just how quickly we can get access to music.
But that part, I think, again, it continues to tell you that you can engage audience, you can get feedback quickly in different ways, right? The old way of, we all grew up on again, I'm a kid of the 90s, I grew up on must-see TV, right? On Thursday night, right? The whole lineup, I could probably still list what came on at 8 and 8:30 and 9 o'clock. That's just not the way that we consume. It's not the way that kids consume. It's not the way that they talk to each other, right? So I'm firmly of the view that culture cannot be contained. The big systems can say, this is going to be the thing, this is only going to be the thing. Like, again, if there's anything for the large conglomerate media platforms to learn from what the music business went through 10, 15 years ago, is that they can no longer prescribe that, and I'll pick on both artists because I love them both, that Taylor Swift or Beyonce is going to be Taylor Swift or Beyonce. It comes from the audience. The audience tells you who's going to be their next Taylor, who's going to be their next Beyonce. The audience tells you that they want to watch, what did you say was Baby Reindeer? The audience tells you that. And now, if you can find ways to follow to where the audience is and create a through line to the economic model where the audience can tell you what they want to pay for, that's, I think, the future of content. And by the way, it's a brilliant future for content because that empowers so many different voices to be at the table.
Yeah, when I first started working in television, people would say, like, well, you can't do that because you have to sell soap in between the acts, right? Like, the whole focus was on serving the advertiser. And so you were serving corporation instead of serving story. And that is what has shifted, that you have to meet the needs of your audience, that you're now, by shifting the model to subscribers and also interaction that happens beyond subscription, it really is this strange democratization of who gets the power now. And it's no longer the laundry detergent company.
Well, that instant feedback, there's something to be said from that, from the audience. I mean, Sherrese, as I was saying, you have such an impressive portfolio of musicians and music, but in some ways, music sort of stands the test of time, right? I mean, we can all think back on music that generates certain feelings and so on. Do you feel the same way about investments in
100%.
film and television?
100%. I mean, look, I don't know how many people in here still do it, but I know I did for 20 plus years or 30 plus years of my life. Every Christmas, sit down with my family and watch Sound of Music, right? Or, think about all of the content around, look at the scandal, I would still go and sit and watch series 1 through, seasons 1 through, how many did we go?
7 or 8, I don't remember.
Season 1 through 7 or 8, because Olivia Pope was my spirit animal. Yes. So yeah, I do think that content it's a different type of test of time. There's a different economic model with it. Look at the resurgence of A Different World and how they've been using that to talk about HBCUs and the importance of those educational institutions. So yeah, I do think that content has and can stand the test of time. The biggest piece of value in, or the largest strength of value in lots of the conglomerates is their library, actually. Right? It's not the networks. We know that networks are under material pressure because people are cutting cords and shifting their viewing habits. It's the library. So yeah, content does stand the test of time.
I just have to ask you this because we're at a Milken conference, but can you give us a sense of what a return on investment looks like?
That was my big question.
Yeah, so I'll tell you who I work for first, so that you can put in context why I drive for returns. I work for the city of Los Angeles. I work for foundations and endowments. FAMU, Florida A&M University is one of our investors. I work for a foundation called the Executive Leadership Council, and they do great work around making sure that there's diversity in corporate boardrooms. So that's who I work on behalf of. And so what I've told them by being a steward of our firm is that if they invest in us, we'll deliver a return so that they can continue to do good work in their communities or for whatever mission-oriented work that they're doing, so that pensioners can retire in dignity. And they can live their lives in retirement well. So that's who I work for. So as a consequence of that, I promise my investors targeted returns in the high teens or low 20s and just any kind of typical private equity type returns. So economic return is important. The better economic return I do, the more money I get to do even more great work. But then I also think about the seat that I get the privilege to sit in. My parents were immigrants. My grandmother came here and scrubbed floors. My dad drove a taxi before he started a real estate business. And it's really important to me to sit in this really special intersection of seat where I don't even know how I got the opportunity to do it, but is that I represent something bigger than myself, and I leave a legacy for little girls who look like me, or little girls who don't look like me, or little girls who are brown, to think of themselves as both investors, and to really also be very focused intentionally on narrative, because obviously what many of you have never experienced an Olivia Pope before or Elisa Ling before understand about anybody who looks like us or lives in our bodies is whatever you see on television or whatever you hear. And so narrative, while fun, and it's good to do a carpet, and it's great to take a beautiful picture with people who I admire for a long time, it's actually about changing narrative and creating representation so that the world, not just people who look like me, but the world, all of you and all of your various forms of being, understand that there is humanity in all of us. So that's the two things that are really important to me that will determine my return on investment for myself.
We're running out of time, but my last question is, in this era of the democratization of media, how do you think creatives and artists can really benefit from this time?
Yep. Ownership.
Start down there. Yeah, go ahead.
I think ownership. I think being in partnership and trying to think about long-term ownership of content and IP. If again we're thinking about where the value is in these large businesses that people are talking about, it's all in the library. So how do we create ownership for creators of library that they can own in 20 years from now?
Staying true to themselves and really sticking it out when there's a story that they want to tell, to know that there will be a place for them to tell that story.
Ask the question again.
How can creatives really benefit from this time of democratization? It's hard to know, because we're still in this sort of transitional phase.
It's hard to know, but I think a combination of both of those answers. I think, I mean, I agree. I would say yes, and to be willing to not be a pawn. Because I think so often creatives are infantilized and taught that we don't have the power, that we need other people to make decisions for us, manage us, control us, direct us. And I think in this moment you have more creatives standing up and saying, I understand the power of what I have to offer, and I will partner with you, but I will not be your pawn.
Yeah.
So well said. Kerry Washington, Pilar Savone, Sherrese, thank you so much. I will see you back here. Thank you.